You know that person who says, "I'm fine," so fast it almost sounds rehearsed. The one who is tired, quiet, clearly carrying something, and still gives you the little smile that says, "Please do not ask twice." Maybe they are the friend who changes the subject before the conversation gets real. Maybe they are the coworker who keeps performing competence while their inbox body and patience are all blinking red. Maybe they are you. People who always say, "I'm fine," are often judged as closed-off, dramatic, in secret, hard to read, emotionally unavailable, or impossible to help. But sometimes "I'm fine" is not a lie exactly. It is a door with a polite sign on it. It says, "I am not ready to explain this. I do not know if you can hold it. I do not want to become too much in this room." So let's reverse the judgment. People who always say, "I'm fine," are not always trying to hide from connection. Sometimes they are trying to protect the part of themselves that learned honesty can make things more complicated. That sentence matters, because emotional honesty is not just saying what you feel. It is choosing who gets access to the truth while you are still tender. For some people, that access has not always been safe. Maybe they grew up around adults who were overwhelmed by feelings, mocked feelings, ignored feelings, or made someone else's pain the center of the room. Maybe they learned that sadness made people impatient. Maybe anger created conflict. Maybe needing reassurance got turned into a lecture. Maybe the family rule was simple: be easy. So the child became easy. They became low maintenance, helpful, funny, useful, quiet, mature, pleasant, or invisible. And later as an adult, the sentence, "I'm fine," can sound like personality. But underneath it, there may be a very old skill: emotional containment. Emotional containment is not always unhealthy. Sometimes it is wisdom. You do not owe your private life to every coworker, relative, stranger, date group chat, or person who asks with distracted politeness. Privacy can be healthy. Timing can be healthy. Choosing the right person can be healthy. The problem begins when "I'm fine" stops being a boundary and becomes a prison sentence. Because there is a difference between not sharing because you feel grounded and not sharing because your body believes sharing is dangerous. One is privacy. The other is protection. Research on emotion suppression gives us a useful warning here. In a classic study, James Gross and Robert Levinson asked people to hide their emotional expressions while watching emotional films. The people suppressing their reactions could look composed on the outside, but suppression carried internal costs, including stronger physiological activation in some conditions. In plain language, the face can stay calm while the body keeps the score for that moment. That does not mean every private person is unhealthy. It means forcing yourself to look okay is not the same as actually being okay. And many people who say "I'm fine" have become excellent at looking okay. They know how to answer the text with a thumbs up. They know how to laugh in the meeting. They know how to walk into a family dinner and become the version of themselves no one worries about. They know how to keep their voice steady while their inner world is dragging a chair against the door. This is why their pain can be easy to miss. They do not always collapse loudly. Sometimes they disappear quietly. They reply slower. They stop bringing up their own life. They sleep more or sleep badly. They become productive in public and unreachable in private. They say, "I'm just tired," when tired is only the top layer. And because they keep functioning, people assume the situation is not serious. That is one of the loneliest parts. Functioning can make suffering invisible. You can pay the bills, answer emails, make dinner, remember birthdays, show up to work, and still be emotionally underwater. This is why a sentence like "I'm fine" deserves curiosity, not interrogation. Sometimes the person saying it is not ready to open the door. Sometimes they are checking whether you will knock gently or try to kick it down. And if you are the person who says it, this is where the story gets tender. Because maybe part of you wants someone to notice, but another part of you is terrified of what noticing will require. If someone sees you, then you may have to explain. If you explain, you may cry. If you cry, you may feel exposed. If you feel exposed, you may remember every time exposure was handled badly. So, "I'm fine" becomes a shortcut out of vulnerability. It ends the conversation before the conversation can hurt. The pattern makes sense. It also has a cost. Over time, the people around you may learn to believe the sentence. They may stop asking, not because they do not care, but because you have trained them to accept the closed door. And then the old fear comes true in a strange way. No one shows up because no one knows where the pain is. That is the shadow side. Protection can become loneliness with good manners. This is especially common for people who were praised for being strong. The reliable oldest child, the calm friend, the high performer, the parentified kid, the person everyone calls low drama. At first, strength feels like safety. Then it becomes a role. And roles are hard to grieve because everyone claps when you perform them well. But being strong should not mean being unreachable. Being private should not mean being unknown. Being calm should not mean you are not allowed to have needs. There's also a difference between emotional regulation and emotional suppression. Regulation says I am feeling something and I am choosing how to respond. Suppression says I am feeling something, and I must erase all evidence before anyone sees it. Regulation gives you options. Suppression gives you a mask. Recent research continues to examine how expressive suppression relates to psychological health, and the careful takeaway is not that expression is always good or suppression is always bad. Context matters, culture matters, safety matters, personality matters. But when a person constantly has to hide what they feel, especially in relationships where they need support, the hidden cost can build. That cost may look like distance. It may look like resentment. It may look like numbness. It may look like snapping over something small because the larger truth had nowhere to go. It may look like being surrounded by people who know your schedule, but not your heart. This does not mean you need to confess everything to everyone. That would not be healthy either. The goal is not to become emotionally available to the whole world. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself the moment someone asks how you are. Maybe the first honest answer is not a full story. Maybe it is, I'm not really fine, but I do not have words yet. Maybe it is, I have been carrying a lot and I do not want advice right now. Maybe it is, can you just sit with me for a minute? Maybe it is, I am okay enough for today, but I am not okay in the bigger sense. Small truth is still truth. You do not have to throw the whole door open. You can crack a window. And if someone in your life always says, I'm fine, the invitation is not to pressure them into a confession. Try steadiness instead. Try, you do not have to explain it perfectly. I just want you to know I am here. Try, do you want advice, distraction, or company? Try remembering what they told you last time. Trust is often built by small evidence, not big speeches. And if the person is showing signs of serious distress, persistent hopelessness, or talking about not wanting to be here that is bigger than a YouTube comment section, it is okay to involve real support, trusted people, crisis resources, or a qualified professional. But for everyday emotional hiding, the reframe is this: maybe you are not cold. Maybe you are not fake. Maybe you are not impossible to reach. Maybe I'm fine was the sentence that helped you stay safe when honesty felt too expensive. But the next chapter is not pretending louder. It is learning who has earned a little more truth. Because you are allowed to be private without disappearing. You are allowed to be strong without being sealed shut. And you are allowed to stop calling it fine when what you really mean is, I have been alone with this for too long. So here is the question. When you say, I'm fine, is it peace, privacy, or protection? And who in your life has earned the next honest sentence,